How are you tracking HSA expenses for non-doctor expenses and mileage to appointments, sunscreen, medications, etc.? Okay, so I have a very simple system when you want to track your HSA expenses. And the way that you want to do this is you want to save your receipts in something like a Google Drive. You can use Dropbox, you can use any of these options, but some sort of online file saving system. I go a step further and I'll explain that here in a second. But what you want to do is each time you spend money that is qualified for an HSA, then you want to go ahead and save that receipt within that folder. So I usually do it in a yearly basis because I don't spend a ton of money on medical expenses right now. So what I do is I save the receipt, scan it in, add it to a Google Drive. I do it usually with my phone, and it's very easy to do. It takes me about a minute each time I have to put a receipt in there, and then I save it in there. Now you can go one step further and reconcile this in a spreadsheet or something like that, where each year you just put in, hey, here's how much money I've spent that I can use for my HSA so that you can keep track of it over time. Now that's just an extra step. You don't absolutely have to do that, but it's much easier to keep track, and I think you're gonna be happier over time when you do that. Now, some of this stuff is a little bit tedious. So if you're going to do that, you just wanna make sure that maybe you schedule a time once a month or once every other month just to compile it all into one place so that you can just batch this so you don't have to spend a bunch of time every single day working on this, because it's very simple if you just batch it all at one time. Just block out a time on your calendar, schedule it to do this, and you can keep it all organized that way. Now, when it comes to mileage is something that's a little bit different. So I use an app for my business called Mile IQ, and I use this the same way for mileage for doctor's visits. And what it does is it actually uses GPS and it tracks where you're driving. So once you're done driving to a location and driving back, you can actually use mileage to reimburse yourself within your HSA. So what Mileage IQ does is it lets you classify each drive. So you can say, hey, this was for medical purposes, so put this in my medical drive. And all of a sudden, Mileage IQ has this folder where it builds up for the year the amount of miles that you drove for medical purposes. And I have a separate folder for business, and I have a separate folder for other things that I need it for as well. So this is a great app to use. Now, it's $60 a year for the pro version. So if you're not doing a ton of medical drives, then maybe you just want to do this by hand by looking at your speedometer and just saying, hey, right now, before I leave, my speedometer is at 20,000 miles. And when I get to the doctor's office, it's at 20,050 miles. That's something where you could do it by hand if you go to the doctor once or twice a year, or you go out and get medical supplies once or twice a year. But if you do it more frequently, and maybe you're doing it monthly, then you can reimburse yourself, and it's worth the money if you can do it that way because it keeps everything organized. Now, if you have a business, Mile IQ is amazing because you're going to make your money back with just a couple of drives, because you can get over 50 cents per mile for business driving miles. But this is my system to keep track of it. Now, I specifically use Google Drive. I set up folders for each and every year. I upload the receipts in for that year, and then I keep a little Google sheet just to keep track of the expenses every single month. I go through and just add those expenses if I have any. Now, like I said, I don't have a ton of them, but I do have more now that I have kids, and I use it more frequently. So it's something that you definitely want to keep track of and keep the receipts in those folders. The reason why you want to do this is because if the IRS comes a knocking and they want proof, you need to have that proof so that you can reimburse yourself. So making sure that you have this available to you and it's in somewhere where you can access it anywhere is something that's really important, because a lot of the HSA sites do have places where you can save your receipts there. But the problem with that is if you ever leave that HSA provider, your receipts are stuck in there and then you got to move it all around. So I just like to have it in one central place so that you can access it at any time. Then I use Mile IQ to make sure I keep track of that as well. Thank you guys so much for watching this money Q&A video. If you guys have any questions or want to leave a question with me, hit me up on Instagram or TikTok at Master Money Co. And if you like this video, here's another Q&A video that I know you're going to love.